All right, today we're diving into a really shocking and pivotal story from what's called the Age of Discovery. It's all about a single ship, and its journey marks the brutal, chilling beginning of England's role in the transatlantic slave trade. And it all kicks off with a name that, well, it's just hard to wrap your head around. Let's get into it. Yeah, you heard that right. Let that just sit there for a second. The Jesus of Lubeck. It was even nicknamed the Good Ship Jesus. I mean, the contradiction is just staggering, and it's right at the heart of this entire story. A name that means salvation, tied to an enterprise of pure suffering. So, that is the big question, isn't it? How on earth does something like that happen? And you've got to understand, this is so much more than a story about one ship. It's really about this perfect storm of faith, money, and brute force. And it's what kicked off a tragedy that would last for centuries. So let's dig in and see exactly where the facts lead us. Okay, first things first, let's talk about the ship itself. What exactly was the Good Ship Jesus? Well, before it became so infamous, this thing was a serious piece of hardware, a true beast of a ship, a titan of 16th century naval engineering, really. And where it came from is super important to the story. See, it was built way back around 1520 in Lubeck, a major city in the Hanseatic League. And we're talking about a monster of a vessel, a 700-ton carrack. This was top-of-the-line military tech for the 1500s. In fact, King Henry VIII himself bought it for the Royal Navy. So, its original job? Projecting power, fighting wars. It was absolutely not built to be a slave ship. That came later. So how did its mission change so drastically? Well, that all comes down to one guy, a young, incredibly ambitious, and frankly, ruthless naval commander from Plymouth named John Hawkins. Now, Hawkins wasn't some nobody. He came from a whole family of well-known sea captains. In 1562, he puts together England's first big slaving voyage. He captures about 300 Africans, sells them in the Spanish colonies, and the profits are just insane, horrifically so. It was so successful that just 2 years later, he's gearing up for an even bigger trip. And by 1565, his new wealth is so significant that the crown itself is giving him an official nod. And when I say official nod, I mean it. Check this out. The College of Arms, the official people who grant coats of arms, gave him one. And what's on it? A bound African man. A demi-Moor, they called it. So the source of his money wasn't some dirty little secret. No, it was right there, out in the open, basically being celebrated as a badge of honor. You know, when you're making that kind of money, people notice. And Hawkins' private venture was about to get an investment from the most powerful person in the entire country. Let's talk numbers for a second. 60%. Just think about that. That was the reported profit margin from these slaving voyages. A 60% return on investment. With numbers like that, it's really no wonder the English crown couldn't resist getting involved. Honestly, that single number pretty much explains everything that's about to happen. That's right, Queen Elizabeth I became a direct partner in the business. She personally chartered her own royal warship, the Jesus of Lubeck, to Hawkins for his next trip in 1564. So let's be crystal clear about this. This was not some rogue captain off on a private mission. This was state-sponsored human trafficking with the seal of approval and the funding from the very top of the English government. Okay, and this is where the story gets even more disturbing, if you can believe it. We really have to look at the incredible hypocrisy at the center of all this. This collusion between what they said they believed and what they were actually doing. I mean, the contrast is just mind-bending. On the one hand, you have John Hawkins, who is known for being a very religious guy. He made his crew follow a strict code, serve God daily, love one another, prayers twice a day. All of this is happening on the top deck. But then, you go below deck. And what's down there? 400 to 500 human beings chained up, captured by force and by lies. It's just unbelievable. So you have to ask, how did they even justify this to themselves? Well, one of the main ways was through something called the Curse of Ham. It's a story from the book of Genesis, and it was completely twisted to serve their purposes. They took this story and reinterpreted it to mean that Africans were descendants of Ham and were destined by God to be slaves. It gave them the religious and moral cover they needed to do these horrific things. And the deception could be sickeningly literal. There are accounts that claim Hawkins used the ship's name, Jesus, as actual bait. He would allegedly lure Africans on board with the promise of meeting a savior named Jesus. And once they were on the ship, the Jesus of Lubeck, the hatches were slammed shut and barred. The trap was sprung. And for a few years, this brutal, profitable business model actually worked for them. but the career of the Jesus of Lubeck as a slave ship while it was headed for a very, very dramatic and violent end in a Spanish colonial harbor. It's 1568. Hawkins is on his third slaving voyage. It's been tough, and his fleet gets hammered by a massive storm. The Jesus of Lubeck is in bad shape. They're desperate, so they limp into a Spanish port, San Juan de Ulua, in modern-day Mexico, hoping to make repairs. But here's the thing. They're deep in enemy territory, and they are incredibly vulnerable. And what happens next is a total catastrophe for the English. A Spanish fleet shows up, and Hawkins manages to negotiate a truce to get his ships fixed. But the Spanish were just playing him. They launch a brutal surprise attack. The English fleet is just overwhelmed by cannon fire. In the middle of all this chaos, Hawkins has no choice. He has to abandon the crippled Jesus of Lubeck. He manages to escape on a smaller ship, the Minion, and his young cousin, a guy you may have heard of, Francis Drake, gets away on another ship called the Judith. So what happened to the good ship Jesus, this once mighty royal warship? Well, after the battle, the Spanish captured the battered hulk and sold it to a local merchant. The price? A measly 601 ducats. What a pathetic, humiliating end for a ship like that. So the ship itself is gone. The story of the Jesus of Lubeck is over. But its legacy? Oh, that was just getting started. You see, these voyages weren't just a one-off. They were the blueprint, the business plan for a horrific system that would last for the next 300 years. So when you boil it all down, what does this one ship's story really tell us? Well, a few big things. First, the English slave trade wasn't some back alley operation. It started as a state-sponsored business. Second, it was all fueled by those enormous profits and given a sick kind of moral permission slip by twisting religion. The ship's final battle just poured gasoline on the fire of the rivalry between England and Spain. And the most important and tragic takeaway? This whole enterprise normalized and institutionalized a system that would go on to enslave over 12 million people. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. We often hear about figures like John Hawkins and Francis Drake as these great English heroes, right? Master explorers, defenders of the realm. But when you know that their fame and their fortunes were built on the decks of ships just like the Jesus of Lubeck, ships filled with human cargo, how does that change the story? How should it make us re-examine the heroes we choose and the history we think we know?